In all my years of watching film, there has been never many animated sequels that have impressed me. In fact, there have been never many animated films that I have enjoyed over the last several years. It's a time where stuff I've enjoyed like Disney continue to disappoint me, despite making up most of my youth and the superfan that I used to be, and DreamWorks to that extent, which I have not found very interesting in the last few years, until the case of Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. As great as a character he was in the Shrek films, I never found myself enjoying the first Puss in Boots film. It's an okay film, but nothing really more than a spin-off that focused on what he did before he met Shrek, and I almost harbored the same feelings for the sequel. I did thought it looked neat when I saw trailers and such, being such a massive improvement on its predecessor visually, but still nothing was there more to interest me, until the reviews started to roll in, and when I saw more people started to pile on praise after praise, that finally piqued my interest. So in that case, I did what needed to be done and actually watched it, and I found that they were absolutely right. This is one of the best animated sequels I've ever seen since Shrek 2, and one of the films you can rightly proclaim as greater than the original in all its aspects. It is indeed a mature film with lessons easy digestible for kids and still entertaining for adults to watch, with a message that encapsulates all about life and acceptance for things that you have. The way the story tackles on three distinct groups is absolutely phenomenal, managing to have all its characters shine in their own right, in a way that makes them feel like co-protagonists rather than antagonists to the story. Because in fact, they are not directly after Puss, they are directly after what Puss is seeking, the last wish. This is a film that focuses on Puss down to his last life, after he uses up his previous 8 of his 9 lives, and seeks to restore them back because of his very wasteful actions, being awakened by the shadow of death coming to claim him for his own arrogance. Above all, this film excels in its animation department. The visuals show that massive improvement over the original, putting that to shame with scenes that manage to stand out, especially they use that sweet technique during the fight scenes to slow down the frames to show you exactly what is going on during the heat of a battle. It's one that works effectively compared to other typical 3D animated films, being more static than fluid, and it's another choice that really does work in favor of its multitude of characters. And the acting by itself by each of the cast members really does put this story to a whole nother level that makes them truly shine throughout their own personal goals and ideas. No one person is overshadowing the other, and it's all equally good. And instead of summing all the good parts of the film, I thought it better take a more closer look at the plot and explain why Puss in Boots: The Last Wish is the perfect sequel, the one that does well to improve upon the original story and to tell something unique and fresh while still focusing on some of the same characters we are already familiar with. So of course, as of now, this will contain complete spoilers for those who haven't watched the movie yet, and in that case, go do so. The film begins perfectly showing how great Puss in Boots is, being loved and adored by all except people like the governor and any other law-abiding official. It cements how Puss is always on top of his game, never been touched by another blade in his life, making a fool out of those who fight them, laughing in the face of death, and demonstrating his popularity amongst the general public. And we see this actually causes a sleeping giant to wake up, and now he has a new task that he has to stop. This is the first scene where we are showcased to the shortened frames. You see how much intense the battle is comparing the size of the tiny small pussy to the big giant green monster. It plays well to demonstrate the strengths of the character in the moment, and he saves the people of Del Mar once again, celebrating a great victory until we see himself crushed by a giant bell. This sets up a crushing revelation that Puss is down to his last life. One, at first he doesn't take seriously, but looks back upon the other 7 instances where he actually screwed the pooch. The doctor here recommends that he should retire as he'd been so wasteful and arrogant with the other 8 times before, which we've known from the character of Puss in Boots, especially from his famed line, "Fear me if you dare." He just always doesn't care because he always comes out on top, shrugging off the final warnings of the doctor about how death will eventually come for us all no matter what we do, where he himself just always decides to end it where he laughs at the face of death, feeling more like an immortal in a mortal realm. But then we see things here start to change after he goes to a bar for the heaviest drink of milk that you can find. This is where we're introduced to a hooded wolf bounty hunter who comes to praise Puss and capture him dead or alive, mainly dead by the way he taps on the poster. And due to his own arrogance, we see that the wolf actually outclasses Puss on a level he hasn't seen, evading every one of his famous maneuvers with ease and managing to best his blade with the sickles that actually make Puss bleed. The most interesting and perfect choice that a kid's film has ever shown. Actual blood to see that Puss has actually been injured, and a moment where his life flashes before his eyes like he was actually close to death in this moment, maybe in the literal sense by the looks of things and how powerful this wolf has become. It is a moment that forces Puss to rethink his life and to in fact retire to evade that fate, and it really turns the movie in another direction for his character and the lessons he is about to face. This is the moment where Puss finally says goodbye to the persona he's had all his life, the adventures he's done, a moment where he buries his clothes and tries to live the rest of his life as a typical house cat, the house of Mama Luna, where he wants to live like a regular one rather than the adventurous one. In a way, this scene is to showcase a symbolic death for Puss in Boots. He's finally heeded his doctor's advice and gave up his ways that would result him dying and ceasing his adventures for eternity. This sets him to meet up Perito, a stray dog who happens to be in the house of cats, and one who can also talk, who is just happy to be there for most of the movie. He just does whatever he finds funny in the cases of the movie, and also serves as the introduction to our first group of antagonists to Puss, Goldilocks and the Three Bears, a crime family in search of Puss in Boots in order to find the last wish, a mystical object that can be used to grant the single wish of anyone's desires. And in the case of Goldilocks, it's to find her real birth parents. This settles them as a group not entirely villains, but actually co-protagonists of the movie, looking for the main object of the film, and actually one that spurs Puss back into action as a tool that does grant him the chance to relive the 8 lives once again to his adventurous ways. In a way, this scene is a revival for him, reversing his symbolic death and reverts him back to those adventurous ways so he can be back on top for a second chance to live 9 more times. And during these events, this is where we discover our third and final villain introduction, being that of Big Jack Horner, the big boss of the bakery business and one who seeks to be the most powerful magic wielder of all. Basically, when you see Jack, he is actually there to be evil for the sake of being evil, as we find out. The big kingpin of the world of Shrek who simply does not care about morals or anything else just because he can. His tragic backstory is one that isn't even explained at all, being very short, where you get to see as a kid he was just surpassed by the likes of Pinocchio and other fairy tales. He didn't amount to much as a child, and nowadays he just wants to be the biggest, baddest, and most popular of all time. And that's a villain you can actually simply get behind. He doesn't have all the conflicts that normal villains have. He is selfish, egotistical, all the things that you would think a villain would be as a child. And he's actually accepted that fact. This moment is where we see the stories start to intersect with each other, where we see Puss reunite with his ex, Kitty Softpaws, who is after her own wish as well. We learn both of them attempted to get hired by Goldilocks' gang and now are both after their own wish, where we establish the characters finally all meeting with each other, staring at the map they so desire, resulting in an all-out fight establishing the stakes and goals of each character, which are all just so well done together. But what's really great about this scene when they all come together and fight is that it's the first instance where the wolf's whistle comes back to haunt Puss, actually revealing something more sinister than a simple bounty hunter in the back of his mind. It's one that fills him with dread and makes him pause at the moment like there's no one left in the world except for him, and that death is actually lurking on his shoulder. This truly sets up a conflict that Puss has to manage and avoid throughout the film, knowing that his past is coming back to haunt him. And then the movie dives right back into the adventure, allowing each group to flesh out their stories and goals, and I like how this shows the transition between them like it's a race for whoever gets first. The only thing stopping them in this case is each other. One thing I like is how we explore the relationship between the bears and Goldilocks. They are actually in fact a family despite Goldie being a human, adopted and searching for a real family, but these are ones that treat her as her own. Brother of course argues as many do in real life, but the papa and mama bear really do care for their daughter Goldilocks in this case, and it's a very nice moment, one that will play well into the finale of the movie. Found family is a core message of her story and plays well into themes of acceptance, while people like Jack Horner are actually just doing things for the sake of doing things, guiding his own men to their deaths. Every time you see Jack on screen, there is someone in his own group sacrificed for his own enjoyment to accomplish the goals that he wants, and he simply does not care about it. It's a situation that puts him face to face with a version of Jiminy Cricket to guide him to make the right choices, but even he sees that's a hard task when he uses things like the Phoenix as a flamethrower. He is just literally the perfect villain in these scenarios, just being an antagonist for the sake of being an antagonist, and that's something that's sorely enjoyable simply because he is the way that he is. And when you see them fight together again, you just see him hitting his own men and only apologizing just after he hit them, where they virtually die right after and he just moves along to the next, killing his own men each time. The battle also shows that slowed frames yet again and highlights more of the emotions and heat of the battle from each person, from the significant to the insignificant characters. It makes them stick out, and the impacts that they hit on each other stronger or more vibrant with the colors that they decide to choose for these scenes. And you notice in most of these scenes that it consists of Puss avoiding everyone in the way. He usually dives more headfirst into battle, but now you see him more careful because once again he hears that whistle and sees that the wolf once again, which gives him the visible goosebumps that gives you goosebumps, inching even more closer to death, where he finally runs away, forgetting that the map is no longer in their possession, but in fact in Goldilocks's. And what's great about this part of the movie is that it opens a bit of more reconciliation for Puss to show. It is a part where he explains regret because of his past. He left Kitty soft paws at the altar foregoing his wedding, and actually Kitty did the same because she couldn't think someone as arrogant as Puss could ever love her as much as he loved himself. A reflection of the many failures that led him to this very point. To look back on how wasteful he was during his life, and also to see that Jiminy Cricket is finally seen how evil Jack Horner is, resulting in the most perfect scene that just shows Jack is the villain just because he can be. And from that moment, this is where we get to explore Puss's past, a moment where he gets to reflect on his 9 lives in the literal sense, where he actually talks to each of them and is actually kind of angry because of his own arrogance that he's shown himself over time. The moments that actually caused him death in the first place, and actually faces himself with the wolf once again, where we finally learn that he himself is the literal, physical embodiment of death. As it turns out, he's been tired of Puss's wastefulness. We know that death is that guiding spirit from beyond that accepts everyone dying naturally, but is personally chasing him down because of how many times he's survived an encounter that naturally anyone would die from the get-go. He tries to goad Puss into battle each time to allow him to face death head on, but we just see him yet again run in fear as time tries to catch up to him. It is the physical representation of fear and anxiety that we get from such situations like death itself. The choice of highlighting the fact that Cat has 9 lives really plays well into the argument that represents how many regretful, arrogant choices we have made in our own lives, and to have death shatter each one piece by piece is that reflection of how close you are to the very end of everything you know. Everything that Puss has feared as overwhelming him, and it forces him to avoid the problem as long as possible rather than face a battle he has no chance at winning. This is the moment where it takes the story for a sadder turn. You see that realization that hits the faces of the other characters. In ways, you see how Kitty is feeling hurt because she sees that he is still in it for himself, not knowing what fears he has at the moment, something he never expected to be afraid of, while Goldilocks expresses her real goal to actually have a proper family. She wants the biological parents that were gone for her life, which actually breaks the heart of the bears because of what they went through and treated her such as a family. And yet, they still decided to support her wish because as long as it makes her happy, that makes them happy. The thing that normal adoptive parents in the real world will want for their own children, to have a good life no matter what they want, and it's a very emotional moment that puts into perspective of the flaws we face and the consequences we choose, whether it be from family for Goldie or life for Puss, and that people like Jack just do whatever the hell they want because they can. And even after they fight again, we still each of them fight for their friends or family no matter what they want. Goldilocks is shown here to forego the map to save his baby bear brother, recognizing the fact that they have treated each other like family, and in this instance, Puss is actually very close to making his wish come true thanks to the actions of Perito, where you see for a single moment that he can finally gain what he has lost. But then, everyone sees death come back into view, demonstrating his powers to shield him off from escape or from anyone else who would dare attempt to help. This is the true end, you think, for Puss in Boots, the time where he has to face death and pick up the sword for a final time, which he relents himself, knowing the gravity of the situation, and actually manages to force death back a bit, because what we know, he was just playing with him the entire time and actually focusing on how offended he is by a cat with 9 lives. The moment where Puss accepts his last life, knowing he can't beat death in the end, and cherishing the life he has with the friends and family he knows. And that's a deal that death accepts himself, knowing that he finally understands mortality and the arrogance of his own ways. His journey is virtually complete in this instance, where he's learning to accept those around him, to be selfless instead of being selfish. While at the same time, Goldilocks is learning to accept her real family, the ones that are right in front of her the whole time. The acceptance of found family for those who have cared for you rather than those who might have abandoned you despite being biologically related. And of course, finally, in this instance, we see that Jack Horner is still in it for himself, growing in size where everyone can finally band together, including Jiminy Cricket, to finally defeat him because he is the true villain of this film, where even he actually learns to accept that he did something wrong. Well, at least in this case, it's considering he wants to know what specifically he did wrong in the first place, which still puts his character into the perspective that he's never cared for anything other than being more powerful. This is a moment where all true protagonists of the film come together to celebrate what they have gained, what they have learned from their entire journeys, and coming to terms with what they have is actually what is best, and it's something all of us can learn to appreciate in our own unique way. All the while with the ending that teases us for something more, for a return to characters far, far away that made our childhoods and changed animation in the 21st century as we know it today. Puss in Boots: The Last Wish is a film that truly surpasses what it set out to achieve from its original. It's a sequel that has a real goal in mind, that includes the same characters and makes them much more better than before, while introducing new ones and fantastically weaving them well into their stories. And this is better to compared to the trend of sequels that I've witnessed over the past few years that have surely disappointed, especially from the likes of Disney. So in that regard, DreamWorks at the very moment has the upper hand and promising future for a great run of quality films, including the potential of a Shrek sequel in the future, which for that, only time will tell. With that said, always care for your life, cause it's the only one you get, and I'm all done here, so goodbye.